Dawn had just broken over the fields of East Texas as we joined Logan to begin inspecting the trap system set up around the ranch. In recent weeks, many pastures have been rooted up, fences showed fresh signs of impact, and several planted areas have been damaged overnight. At first, we assumed that only a few wild hogs had passed through. However, what awaited us throughout today's journey proved that the situation was far more serious. The more sites we checked, the more we realized that the scale of wild hog activity exceeded all expectations. The first trap had been set the previous evening right at the edge of the woods, where rows of oaks met the ranch's open grasslands. As soon as we stopped the vehicle, we could see that the trap door was still securely shut. As we approached, the whole group was astonished to find a large number of wild hogs inside. They moved constantly, their noises echoing through the quiet forest. The dense tracks and the damp soil showed that the entire sounder had passed through the area during the night. Logan quickly recorded the number of animals, checked the condition of the trap, and completed the ranch's wildlife management procedures before moving on to the next location. Only about 100 meters away stood the second trap. The short distance made us doubt that we would find much more, but the results were quite the opposite. This trap also held an unusually large number of wild hogs. Looking at the fresh signs on the ground, Logan remarked thoughtfully that the forest's peaceful appearance by day was entirely different from what took place after dark. The trap system revealed that this area served as a regular travel corridor for several groups of hogs. That meant the risk of damage to pastures, crops, and ranch infrastructure remained high unless close monitoring continued. Our next stop was near the equipment shed, where tractors and farming machinery were stored. The surrounding open ground had once led Logan to believe this would not be an ideal location. Yet the results changed all of our minds. Fresh tracks stretching from the land behind the shed to the trap indicated that wild hogs frequently passed through in search of food and water. Their presence so close to the ranch's work area further underscored the need to maintain management measures that reduce the risk of encounters between people and wildlife. In the afternoon, we continued to a trap set in a lush green pasture not far from the ranch. The soil there retained moisture after rains, attracting many animals to feed. Reviewing footage from the trail camera, Logan saw that a group of wild hogs had entered the area the previous night without significantly altering the ground. The signs on the ground suggested that this had been a favored location for a long time. After carefully recording the information, the team updated the hog activity map to support management plans for the coming weeks. The fifth trap lay deep in the woods along a naturally formed game trail. This site produced the most striking results of the day. Layers of overlapping tracks covered the path, showing that multiple groups had used the route over several consecutive nights. Logan spent considerable time surveying the surroundings to understand why the area attracted so many hogs. The information gathered would help the ranch refine its monitoring locations and improve the effectiveness of its wildlife management efforts in future seasons. After completing the final inspection and returning to the ranch, we took the opportunity to answer a question that viewers often leave beneath our videos. What do you do with the hogs after the control operation is complete? Logan explained that the answer depends on local regulations, the condition of the animals, and the procedures followed by the ranch or the Wildlife Management Authority. The primary goal of this work is not recreational hunting, but rather to reduce damage to crops, livestock, and infrastructure while helping to ensure the safety of those who work the land. At the end of a long day, what remained with us most was not the number of hogs recorded, but the reminder that behind the peaceful appearance of the Texas countryside lie the daily challenges faced by farmers. Dawn had just begun to break over the rolling hills of California. A light veil of mist still lingered across the open grasslands, while birdsong slowly echoed from the distant oak groves. Morgan and I set out early to inspect the monitoring sites we had established the previous afternoon. After weeks of consistently documenting signs of wild boars appearing around the farm, we wanted to gain a clearer understanding of their movement patterns and identify which areas were experiencing the greatest pressure. The first site was located near a trail leading from the forest into the pasture. When we arrived, the results caught both of us by surprise. The data showed that only a single boar had passed through during the night. To be honest, I felt a little disappointed because this area had been full of fresh tracks just days before. Morgan simply smiled and reminded me that nature rarely follows human expectations. A change in food availability or the arrival of a single rainstorm can send an entire sounder onto a completely different route. That unpredictability is precisely what makes tracking activity in the field such a demanding task. Leaving the first location behind, we headed toward the edge of the pine forest on the western side of the farm. Even from a distance, we could see the ground torn apart in large patches, with countless overlapping tracks stretching along the forest's edge. The scene clearly showed that the area had been bustling with activity throughout the night. Morgan paused for quite a while to study the signs before explaining that this location lies between the water source and the fields, making it a natural travel corridor for wild boars. Looking at the freshly overturned soil, I suddenly understood why so many local farmers become concerned whenever they discover similar signs near their cultivated land. What happens in just a single night can undo weeks of hard work. The third monitoring site had been placed in a recently harvested field not far away. After the harvest, plenty of scattered grain and plant matter still remained on the ground, creating ideal feeding conditions for wildlife. The camera captured several large boars visiting the area something that surprised everyone on the team. Standing in the middle of the vast field, I realized that places which seemed to have completed their agricultural cycle still play an important role in the daily rhythms of wild animals. It was a detail I had never truly appreciated before. Later that afternoon, we ventured deeper into the forest to inspect another monitoring site. Earlier camera footage had recorded heavy activity there, so both of us expected to gather more valuable information. And we reached the location. The forest felt strangely quiet. Fresh tracks suggested that the sounder had already moved on. Morgan looked around before saying, "They learned faster than we think." His words stayed with me for a long time. Nature is constantly changing, and every survey reminds us that no single moment or single location can ever tell the whole story. Rather than dwelling on our disappointment, we continued to the next monitoring site later that same night. The headlights of the pickup truck swept across low shrubs and towering oak trunks, revealing even more fresh signs of activity on the damp ground. The quiet atmosphere of the forest after dark made me feel the rhythm of the natural world more vividly, long after people had gone home. Meanwhile, Morgan carefully recorded the location, direction of travel, and other field observations to add to our monitoring map. Those small pieces of information, collected over many weeks, would gradually help us build a clearer picture of how wild boars move around the farm. The final site marked the end of a long day. Darkness had completely settled over the California countryside, leaving only the glow of our vehicle's lights and the steady chorus of insects filling the stillness. Before heading back, we spent some time comparing all the data we had collected throughout the day. What stayed with me most was not any single location, but the realization that each monitoring site contributed another piece to a much larger puzzle. Some areas showed a sharp decline in activity, while others revealed unmistakable signs of movement. In many cases, you never know what is waiting for you behind a trap gate. There are times when we return with high expectations, only to be met with disappointment. But there are also times when everything changes completely overnight. Today, we are counting down the 5 most memorable trap checks, and the number 1 spot belongs to the trap that left everyone completely surprised when they returned to the site. The 5th spot took place on a farming property where wild boars regularly appeared during the night. The trap was set in the late afternoon and left active throughout the night. When the sun rose high the following day, it was time to check the results. Even from a distance, everyone noticed that the trap was no longer in its original condition. That could only mean one thing. It had been triggered during the night. After approaching the site, the team began handling the situation and completed the harvest. The wild boars were then loaded onto a vehicle and transported away from the area. A pretty good result, but the next positions are even more remarkable. Unlike the previous one, this trap was deployed very early. The goal was to take advantage of the period when wild boars were moving most actively during the day. After completing all preparations, the team left the site and waited. By late afternoon, they returned. The trap had done its job. The results showed that wild boar activity in this area was higher than originally expected. A quick harvest was carried out before nightfall. It seemed like this had already been a successful day, but the next location brought an even bigger surprise. This was a special location. Dense woodland on one side, an open area on the other, where fresh tracks frequently appeared. Experience suggested that places like this often served as ideal travel corridors for wild boars. The trap was positioned directly along that route, and this time, the prediction was completely accurate. When they returned to inspect it, everyone quickly realized that this was one of the best results seen so far in the video. After handling the site and completing the harvest, the entire team believed it would be difficult to find a trap more effective than this one. But then the second place entry appeared. This was the trap that had generated a great deal of expectation. The surrounding area was covered with signs. Trail cameras had also recorded frequent activity beforehand. Everything suggested that this could be a major harvest. During the night, the trap was indeed triggered. The good news arrived very early. But when the team approached the site the following morning, emotions quickly changed. After all the expectations, the results stopped at just 4 boars. Not a complete failure, but certainly not what everyone had hoped for. Even so, instead of giving up, the team decided to process the site quickly. The trap was then reset the very same day, a decision that seemed completely ordinary, but it would lead to the most memorable moment of the entire video. That evening, everyone returned to the very trap that had caused disappointment. No one knew whether resetting it would bring any results at all. But then, in the darkness, something unexpected happened. Movement began appearing around the trap site. Then the numbers started to increase. And eventually, the trap was triggered once again. When they inspected the site, everyone quickly realized that this time was completely different. What had failed to happen during the previous check had finally occurred. After nothing more than a simple reset, the trap produced results far beyond expectations. That is why it deserves the #1 position on today's list.
Hey. Shh, come on.
The traps do not always produce the same results. Sometimes they exceed expectations. Sometimes they leave everyone disappointed. But it is exactly that unpredictability that makes every return to a trap site memorable. And who knows, during the next inspection, an even bigger surprise may be waiting just ahead. To deal with this problem, we deployed a series of traps in the areas where wild boars are most active. Today, we will check each trap and see what results the operation has produced after a night of activity. The first 3 traps I checked today did not produce the results we had hoped for, although all 3 were triggered during the night. Each trap managed to hold only a single wild boar. After collecting the trapped animals, the disappointment was clear on everyone's face. Given the density of wild boars in this area, we had expected much better results. It seemed that the larger sounders had changed their travel routes, or perhaps the current trap locations were no longer as effective as before. So instead of continuing to wait, we decided to move to new locations in the hope of finding where the boars were actually concentrating their activity. The first trap was placed in a field of tall grass, about 5 miles west of the trap location from the previous day. Based on fresh signs discovered in the area, we believe this could be a new travel route for the wild boars. And it took only one night to prove that theory. When we returned to inspect the trap this morning, it had been triggered. Inside, an entire group of wild boars was packed together, desperately trying to escape. After the series of disappointments earlier, this was exactly the result we had been waiting for. Without wasting any time, we began collecting the catch and processing all the trap boars before continuing on to the next location. Because a large number of wild boars have been trapped at the first location, it took us quite a while to collect and process them. By the time we continued to the second trap, which was located quite a distance away, the afternoon was already coming to an end. This trap had been set in an area with very high wild boar activity, so the outcome was almost exactly what we expected. As soon as we arrived, it was clear that the trap had been triggered and was holding a large number of wild boars inside. After a quick inspection of the site, we began collecting the catch. These consecutive successes showed that the decision to relocate the traps had been absolutely correct, because we had finally found where the large groups of boars were truly active. By the time we reached the final trap, darkness had completely fallen. After a long day of traveling and working from one location to another, everyone was exhausted. But that feeling quickly disappeared when our lights illuminated the trap ahead. Inside was a large group of wild boars crowded together, searching for a way to escape. The trap had performed even better than expected, delivering the best result of the entire day. Even though it was already dark, the team could not hide their excitement and immediately got to work collecting the catch. After the disappointments at the start of the day and the risky decision to move the traps to new locations, all of our efforts had finally been rewarded. As the last wild boars were collected and we left the area under the cover of darkness, today's results proved one thing very clearly. Sometimes the problem is not the trap itself, but where the trap is placed. After a series of failures in the morning, the decision to boldly move into a new area helped us relocate the boar's travel route and achieve results far beyond our expectations. Every boar captured today means one less threat to the fields that would otherwise be damaged in the nights ahead. The battle against wild boars in Texas is far from over, but at least today, the traps fulfilled their purpose, and farmers have one more reason to feel confident as the growing season approaches. Through the night surveillance cameras, an entire group of wild hogs appeared boldly on the grassy edge of the forest, digging through the ground and leaving behind unmistakable signs. I did not need long to decide exactly where the trap needed to be placed. The very next day, we returned to that exact location. The trap was set up quickly, positioned directly where the hogs had appeared the night before. This time, we did not hesitate to spread a large amount of bait right in the center of the trap, enough to keep the entire sounder inside as they returned. Everything was finished before dark. Night fell, and just as the cameras had shown before, the wild hogs came back. The next morning, when we arrived at the site, the trap had captured the entire group. Inside, they crowded together and moved chaotically after spending the night trapped, confirming that this time we had placed the trap with absolute precision. The next trap was placed in an open clearing inside the ranch, completed only minutes before darkness fully covered the area. It was a fairly exposed position, but it sat directly along the hog's movement route, so we decided to take the chance. The following morning, when we returned to inspect it, everyone almost froze in disbelief. Inside the trap was not an entire group as expected, but only a single animal. But it was the dominant boar, massive in size and unbelievably aggressive. Its strength alone was enough to shake the entire trap every time it moved within the confined space. The moment was tense, but also thrilling because this was the most important target of all. Maintaining maximum caution, we slowly brought the situation under control and carefully secured the massive boar onto the truck, ending an unexpected but highly valuable capture. The next trap was set during daylight while the area remained quiet and relatively undisturbed. Everything was completed quickly and discreetly, enough to avoid making the hogs suspicious. But the surprising part was that we did not have to wait until morning. The moment darkness fell, the activation signal came through. The trap had been triggered. Without wasting time, we immediately moved toward the trap during the night. From a distance, chaotic noises echoed through the silent landscape, signaling that several hogs were already trapped inside. As we approached the area, everything became clear, and without wasting a single second, we quickly secured the situation and began collecting the results from this successful trap. The next trap was placed deep inside the forest, in the area where the wild hogs usually retreated at dawn after tearing through the ranch during the night. It was a less disturbed location, making the animals far less cautious when returning to their familiar shelter. The trap remained there overnight. And the following morning, when we returned to inspect it, we were almost stunned by what we saw inside. The number of hogs trapped this time was far greater than before, packed tightly together and constantly moving after many hours inside the enclosure. Clearly, this time we had placed a trap directly at the center of the entire Sounders gathering point. Not every group of wild hogs we capture is handled the same way. In areas with suitable terrain, locations far enough from ranches and isolated enough to prevent the animals from returning, we choose to relocate and release them back into the wild. This approach reduces pressure on the farming areas while also minimizing the chance of the hogs returning to cause more destruction. However, choosing the correct release location is critical. It must be far enough and isolated enough. Otherwise, all the previous effort could become meaningless within only a few nights. That is also part of how we balance protecting the ranch while controlling the wild hog population responsibly. When the final traps had been checked, the ranch slowly returned to a quieter state after many tense days. Not every wild hog had been captured, and not all of them were handled in the same way. But the most important goal had been achieved, controlling the immediate threat facing the ranch. Even so, the marks left behind in the dirt served as a clear reminder of one thing. This battle is far from over. Out there, deep within the forests, other groups of wild hogs are still moving, watching, and waiting for the moment to return. And when that happens, we will be ready to return as well. Early in the morning at a livestock area located along the edge of forest in Arizona, I arrived after receiving repeated reports about wild boars causing destruction. They were digging up the ground, damaging livestock areas, and continuously pushing deeper into the ranch. Creating increasingly serious damage within a short period of time. I specialize in handling and controlling invasive wild boar herds. And this time, the mission was no longer as simple as before. The signs they left behind showed that they were no longer moving alone, but appearing in large groups. So what if the entire herd entered a trap at the same time? Was there a way to control them all in a single operation? That was exactly why I had to use large steel cage traps. Starting today, the first trap was triggered during the night. When I returned the next morning, an entire herd of wild boars had already been captured inside, packed tightly together and reacting violently in a confined space. There was no time to wait, so we immediately moved in to begin the collection process. But just as everything seemed under control, an unexpected incident happened. Through a small gap in the fence, one wild boar suddenly escaped. It charged away at incredible speed, completely disrupting the original operation and forcing us to react immediately. But after that sudden situation, everything was quickly brought back under control. We tightened the process, handled every step more carefully to avoid further mistakes, and the escaped boar did not get very far before it was restrained. In the end, the entire herd was still loaded onto the transport cages on the truck, fully under control. A situation that seemed like it could spiral but was handled in time. Another trap was also triggered during the night. Watching through the camera, I was genuinely shocked by the number of wild boars arriving. They walked into the trap one after another with almost no hesitation. By the time the gate slammed shut, the entire herd had been trapped inside, creating a scene far beyond expectations. Without waiting until morning, we immediately headed to the trap location during the night. Under the lights, the wild boars were still packed together and reacting violently inside. We quickly began collecting them, working in close coordination to load each one onto the truck and regain control before the situation became even more unpredictable. The third trap was placed in the middle of an open area inside the ranch, a location that did not seem ideal because it lacked cover. But the result turned out to be completely the opposite. When we checked it, an entire crowded herd of wild boars had already been trapped inside, packed tightly together and moving chaotically through the large enclosure. Without hesitation, we immediately moved in, under the harsh sunlight across the open land. The wild boars reacted aggressively as soon as they saw people approaching. But this time, everything was already under control. We quickly began the collection process, coordinating closely to remove the entire herd decisively. The fourth trap was placed directly in a potato field, the area suffering the worst damage. When we checked it, dozens of wild boars had already been trapped inside after arriving overnight. Without wasting time, we rushed in immediately. Facing the violent reactions of the herd, the entire team worked together quickly, handling every step decisively to collect them all, load them onto the truck, and completely regain control of the situation. The final trap was placed directly inside the cattle ranch area. When I checked it, I immediately realized the level of danger. The wild boars had moved much closer to the livestock area than I originally expected. But this time, I did not rush in to handle the situation right away. We stopped and observed, waiting for the herd inside to gradually calm down and reduce their pain. Once everything settled, the team slowly began each step, opening guidance paths and directing them to move in controlled directions instead of forcing. There was no more chaos like in the previous traps. Everything happened more slowly, but more precisely. And that was how we handled the entire herd of wild boars right beside the ranch area without creating any additional risks.
Yep.
When the final trap had been cleared, everything finally became quiet again. Looking back across the entire area, I knew we had controlled a larger number than ever before this time. From open ground and crop fields to the ranch itself, the wild boars had been stopped at every point. But more importantly, we had stayed one step ahead of them. And in this confrontation, being slow just once could have changed everything completely. The first trap was placed right along the edge of the forest, where signs of feral hog activity were clearly visible. After finishing, we moved on to continue setting the remaining traps. By the afternoon, when we returned to inspect it, I immediately realized that something had happened. The trap had been triggered, and inside, an enormous feral hog had been caught cleanly, massive in size and extremely aggressive. As we approached, it constantly moved and slammed violently against the trap frame, creating heavy crashing sounds that made the atmosphere more tense than ever. The second trap was also placed along the forest edge, only about 600 meters from the first location. When we checked it, a pair of feral hogs had already been captured inside. They moved constantly within the confined space, reacting violently the moment they saw us approaching. But what caught my attention even more was this: a pair like this, under favorable conditions, could produce anywhere from 16 to 20 offspring within just a single year. That meant if they were not controlled in time, their numbers would rise incredibly fast. And catching them now meant eliminating a major threat before it could grow in the future. Next was a trap placed right beside the ranch area where we were staying, a location so familiar, even somewhat obvious, that at first I did not expect much from it. The trap was set during the day, and everything happened quickly, almost like a simple test to see whether the feral hogs were truly moving this close to the area. Once everything was finished, we left without thinking that anything significant would happen. But that evening, when we returned to inspect it, I nearly froze the moment I spotted the trap from a distance. The movements inside, the constant sounds of impacts, revealed that something far beyond our expectations had happened. And when we got closer, the sight in front of us genuinely shocked me. Inside the trap was such a large number of feral hogs that the entire enclosure was packed tight. They crowded together, moving chaotically and repeatedly crashing into the trap door within clear space. It was no longer just a few scattered animals. It was an entire group that had moved dangerously close to the ranch without us even realizing it. At that moment, I understood they had been much closer than we ever imagined. The next trap was placed deep inside the forest, in an area that had just been hit by heavy rain. Water had collected into muddy pools, and the ground had become slippery and difficult to move across. But those very conditions also made this place an ideal gathering point for feral hogs, a place with water and soft soil for rooting. After finishing the setup amid the damp surroundings and the heavy smell of wet earth, we left the area behind in silence. And judging by the signs around us, I was almost certain they would return. Exactly as expected, this trap became the one that delivered the biggest result. When we came back to inspect it, I could hardly believe my eyes. Inside were dozens of feral hogs packed together, from massive adults to smaller piglets crowded beneath them. The space, already narrow, had become completely overloaded. They moved frantically, continuously slamming into the metal frame and creating relentless crashing sounds. The scene in front of me not only showed how effective the trap had been, but also made me realize just how enormous the feral hog population in this area truly was. Finally came two smaller traps placed along the western edge of the forest. Although their size was modest and I did not initially expect much from them, the results still left me fairly satisfied. When we checked them, each trap had captured a pair of feral hogs. The space inside was tight, but still enough to hold them securely. And just like before, they reacted aggressively the moment they noticed people approaching. Looking at these results, I realized that even small traps, if placed in the right locations, could still be just as effective. After inspecting all the traps, we began gathering and transporting the feral hogs back to the collection point. The work was far from easy, as they continued reacting violently inside the confined spaces, forcing us to coordinate every movement carefully. Each trap was handled one by one, each animal loaded onto the trucks under constant tension but strict control. And as the final vehicle pulled away, I looked back at the area where the traps had been set and realized that this time we had accomplished far more than expected. But at the same time, it also reminded me that if we ever let our guard down, everything could quickly return to the way it was before. The first trap was installed early in the morning at a location filled with clear movement trails. With Arizona's dry terrain, I expected it would take quite some time before the wild hogs returned. But everything happened much faster than expected. Only a short while later, the activation signal appeared. There was no time to wait, and we immediately moved toward the trap location. Even from a distance, the movement inside showed that the result was far from small. As we got closer, the entire group of wild hogs had already been trapped inside. Without hesitation, we quickly secured the situation and handled everything before the animals could create any danger. The second trap was placed deep in the forest during daylight, in an area covered with signs showing that wild hogs frequently pass through. Everything was completed fairly early, but this time we did not receive an immediate signal like we had with the previous trap. It was not until late at night that the trap was finally triggered. Because of the difficult terrain and poor visibility, I decided not to take unnecessary risks by approaching during the night, and instead waited until the following morning. When we returned to inspect it, the result was obvious. The trap had successfully held several wild hogs after many hours inside the bush. And as usual, we quickly secured the situation and began collecting everything before moving on to the next location. The final trap was left overnight in a hidden section of the forest. Through the monitoring cameras, We confirmed that the trap had been triggered during the previous night when the wild hogs returned along their familiar movement route. The next morning, without hesitation, we headed directly toward the final trap location. The moment we arrived, everything became clear. The wild hogs were still trapped inside after spending hours confined within the enclosure. Without wasting time, we quickly brought the situation under control and handled everything, bringing the final trapping operation in this area to a close. When the final trap had been checked, our entire operation in Arizona also came to an end. Despite the harsher terrain and greater challenges compared to previous locations, the trap placements this time still proved highly effective. Every trap, every activation showed that wild hogs still move according to their own patterns, and as long as the right location is found, they can still make mistakes. But that is also why none of this is ever truly finished. Because out there, deep within the dry forests of Arizona, there are still fresh tracks waiting to be discovered, and sooner or later, we will definitely return. The first few days, the hogs approached the trap area, but never fully entered. They fed around the edges, stopped, observed. We stayed patient. During this stage, we checked the entire system, from the drop door mechanism to the sensitivity of the trigger device, making sure everything would function perfectly when the real moment arrived. The following night, things began to change. A small group moved deeper inside, no longer stopping at the edges. They started feeding within the trap zone. I monitored everything through the camera system. Once the entire group was fully inside the control area, I activated the system. Bang! The door slammed shut in the darkness. The sound of metal echoed sharply, short, clean, decisive. The hogs scattered in panic, desperately trying to escape, but the locking system held firm. Not a single one could break free from this modern trapping system. That was the first confirmation. The trap was working exactly as intended. But I understood that was only the outer edge of the herd. The next morning, we returned to the site. What appeared before us exceeded every expectation. The number of hogs inside the enclosure proved that our plan had succeeded. Even after being captured, the feral hogs continued thrashing violently, trying every possible way to escape. We had to respond quickly, following the proper procedures established by wildlife protection authorities to ensure both safety and humane handling while avoiding unnecessary risks. When everything was finally over, the area slowly returned to its original silence, as if no disturbance had ever happened there at all. The next day, we received reports from local residents about feral hogs invading a nearby ranch. Without hesitation, the entire team moved out immediately. That night, the signals were completely different. More movement, denser activity. This was no longer a small group. It was a large portion of the herd. They approached far more cautiously. The hogs along the outer edge paused longer than usual, as if inspecting the environment. Just one mistake, especially triggering the trap too early, could cause the entire herd to retreat instantly. So I waited. The number inside the trap kept growing, layer by layer. And when the lead hog finally stepped in, I knew the moment had come. Without a second of hesitation, I pressed the trigger decisively. The door slammed shut. Bang! The steel frame shook violently as heavy impacts echoed throughout the area. Inside, the feral hogs fought wildly, throwing all their strength into desperate escape attempts. But the trap system stood firm, completely unmoved by their aggression. As everything slowly calmed down, the true scale of the herd finally revealed itself. Dozens of hogs, adults and piglets alike, were fully contained within the controlled zone. The next morning, we returned once again to inspect the site. This time, the hogs no longer had the strength to struggle as violently as before. Every single one remained secured within a specialized trap system, proving once again how effective the operation had been. Another successful mission. The local residents could finally breathe easier about their crops, at least for now. But we all understood clearly this was not the end. After the traps closed during the night, the most important part was never the moment of activation, but the way we returned to the site after. Daylight always reveals things the darkness hides, movement patterns, the level of impact, and most importantly, whether the trap structure managed to hold the entire herd. As we approached the area, there was no longer the chaos of the night before, only heavy movement from inside. I stopped before getting too close. Observe first, always. The first signs became immediately clear. The ground around the trapdoor had been torn apart. The steel bars carried marks from repeated impacts, but there was no point of failure. That meant the system had held strong throughout the entire night. And when we looked inside, everything became undeniable. The entire herd had been contained. Not a single one remained outside. No signs of escape. Controlling wildlife in agricultural areas is not a direct confrontation. It is a process of reading behavior, rebuilding patterns, and waiting for the exact right moment to act. An effective trap is not only about its structure, but about how it is introduced into the environment without disrupting the herd's natural routine. When humans are patient enough to understand and disciplined enough not to act too early, control is no longer a matter of luck. It becomes a system,